a very special webinar today where I get to highlight one of my favorite customers that I get to work with, Desiree over at Terray. Almost rhymes. Actually, I think it technically does rhyme. So yeah, another reason why it just works so perfectly, right? Today, we're going to talk about how to successfully deploy SmartSuite across your unique organization. Your being Desiree's, but could serve as an example of what you could do over at your organization as well. We're going to talk about a number of things. Best practices in a number of different, avenues of SmartSuite. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and cover our agenda. Make sure we're all on the same page. We're first going to go over some background on Desiree, then Terray, then the cross-functional organization as a whole, get an idea of just how unique Terray is in the way that they like to work. And then I want to talk about what Terray was like before SmartSuite, and then since SmartSuite has been introduced to the organization. And then from there, we're going to dive directly into the product. I'm going to hand it over to Desiree and let her do what she does best. If any questions come up along the way, feel free to throw them in the Q&A section. I will go to this next slide, and Desiree, feel free to just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
So thanks, Jeff, and thanks everyone for coming today. I'm really excited to tell you about our journey with SmartSuite. But first, we'll start with who I am. For a little bit of context, Terray has been around for about 5.5 years, and I have been at Terray for 5 of those years. And because I joined Terray when we were a very small company, I wear a lot of different hats in this organization, as Jeff so kindly illustrated with the hat array on the side of this picture. My primary title today is a senior project manager, but I started as a scientist in the lab. Over the course of my time here, I've managed 3 production groups at Terray across different parts of our organization, while also doing some operations on the side. Last year, I officially moved out of the lab into operations, and specifically into project management. But because we're a small company and things don't really fall off, I'm still also leading those lab operations, safety efforts, and facilities efforts as part of this role. So project management is a large part of what I do, but it's one of many things that we do at Terray. Next slide. Figured we should start with what is Terray, because that is a pretty common question. Our name does not tell you a whole lot of what we do. We're a biotechnology company. Our goal is to radically change the way we discover and develop small molecule therapeutics. We do that through an integration of ultra-high throughput experimentation, generative AI, biology, medicinal chemistry, automation, and nanotechnology. And I just want to say that to really highlight how interconnected our work is, and part of what Jeff is saying about our unique rollout, is our organizational chart, so to speak, is in the photo next to our description. Each one of those circles is a team at Terray that focuses on unique problem areas for their work. And one thing that you'll notice is just how interconnected all this is. Each of those lines talk to a relationship across the company, across the teams, and almost everything that happens at Terray requires people from multiple organizations in order to operate. And everything that we have rolled out as a success of our company is because of the working together of all of these different groups. So let's go on to the next slide. So, yeah, great complexity. That is a great description for our company. Complex problems need complex teams. So in our life before SmartSuite, I guess I would say, why were we looking for a tool like SmartSuite? To rephrase that question a little bit. A big one is that we are not the same company today that we were 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we were 8 people, and things that worked well at 8 or 10 people weren't really working as well by the time we were hitting 70 or 100. As an example, when there's only 8 of you in a company and you have a really hard problem to solve, you all can come together in the room, bring all your unique perspectives, talk it through, make a plan, and go out and do the work. As we grew and grew, that resulted in a bit of fractured workflows. People used different tools, there was unclear alignment on priorities, responsibilities, roles. Periodically, work got duplicated because 2 different people had similar ideas and we weren't communicating about them clearly. And as an example of what this was looking like, something that we noticed and captured as we transitioned to SmartSuite was in the first 6 months of our SmartSuite deployment, we saw that we had done more than 150 projects using 91 unique project teams that contained more than 2 people. So that excludes all of the single team work that happened, or single person work that happened. What this actually means is that our teams were coming together to solve a unique problem, disbanding, coming back together with new people to solve different problems. And most of these projects and project teams were all working simultaneously, which could occasionally result in a little bit of overwhelmed people on our team. And part of our goal for SmartSuite is trying to do the right thing at the right time and having that visibility. So what were we looking for? The first one, actually, if you work with people, you may understand, we needed a new tool that had no biases. We needed to start with people with clear expectations without any expectations of what this tool could do, so that we could tell them all the things that we could do with it. We were also looking for a flexible database. Our executive leadership team had unique fields that they wanted required that we couldn't find in other tools. We also wanted to be able to do ownership assignments across our organization with different breakdowns, and we could do that with SmartSuite. We wanted customizable views so that our executive leadership team could look at fields that were most important to them, while our project leaders could use this information in a way that was most useful to them and their organizations. And as someone who was going to manage this, I wanted to make sure that we had forms to standardize how our information was being put in, to make sure that we had automations to help run updates and do follow-up so that I wasn't having to follow up on 150 unique projects every day. And we could use those to make sure we got the right information from the right people at the right time. So on the next slide, you can see a little bit about our implementation. We started with SmartSuite in August 2023 with a rollout to our company. At that time, we rolled out the dashboard across the organization, but only gave access to one team's managers. This allowed us to test our tools to make sure that things were working well for the end users and to really focus on their needs. It was pretty successful. So in January, we rolled it out to the rest of the managers across our organization. In February, we rolled it out to the entire production group at Terray with the development of a new system we'll talk about, our change management system. And in May, we're bringing in other organizations. We're bringing in our automation groups, our finance team, and our operations groups to manage our capital equipment and our assets. And so just to show a little bit about what SmartSuite unlocked for us, speaking specifically about our change management solution. In 2023, our previous change management system, which in full disclosure was a Google Doc that people had to fill out, so nothing fancy, resulted in 7 reports that were captured, 7 events that were captured. These things were process deviations, change notifications, CAPAs, preventative plans. And if we contrast that to rolling out our new platform in February until today, we have captured 44 different events that are more well characterized and have been monitored. And so Nate and Jeff did the math to show us that's 15.7 times more events captured and acted on. And Jeff wanted me to highlight that this basically took 2 hours of solution development time over a couple of meetings with the chief platform officer to make sure that it captured the information he was looking for. And I think that part of why this was so successful is that our team, we use SmartSuite forms to meet our teams where they're at. And we'll talk a little bit about those forms as we dive into the solution. But people are definitely more willing to put in forms with short blurbs of information than write up a super long document and get stuck in the weeds of how do I word this thing so perfectly.
I thought it was really interesting as well that the actual person who asked for this change management system, stakeholder, if you will, was somebody who was reluctant to adopt SmartSuite in the first place. And after seeing the success of the dashboards, curious, hey, what would a change management system look like in here? Yeah. And then this is the one that produced obviously the greatest metrics so far. Still a lot to go through.
And he was also, I think part of his reluctance initially made him a really good champion for it in his department, because he took that initial reluctance. And then once we rolled everything out and he saw that we were meeting our metrics in the previous solutions and people were interacting with it, he saw that it could be very useful for his team. And so he really championed it in his organization to make sure that it deployed fully in that space. All right, and so what's next? I would say what's now for Terray and SmartSuite. We're currently building out an asset and service contract management system. It's going to allow us to track assets from their purchase to their retirement. And the goal here is to allow facilities, finance, our automation teams, our end user, and our operations groups to be aligned on what an asset needs, when it was set up, and if it requires service long-term. And if you think back to all those hats I wear, you may find out, or you may pick up on the fact that 2 of the teams that I'm referring to are things that I deal with. As our organization has continued to grow, we found that it's important to know what equipment's coming in, if our building's ready for it. And I'd much prefer that than someone coming by and saying, hey, this new equipment just got delivered. Can you help me install it? And so we're looking to automate that and work with our end users to make sure that we are ready for equipment when it arrives, so it can be set up on day 1 or as close to it as possible, and that the equipment is serviced long-term. It'll also allow us to centralize all of our records on this equipment, so our end users always know when their equipment was worked on. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but one thing you'll notice as we go into this solution is that it's a pretty complex data structure, and we're really using automations and linked records and different views so that everyone in the organization can have their own view of their equipment rather than having 15 different spreadsheets, one for each organization. So before we dive into the dashboards or the solutions, are there any questions, Jeff?
As of right now, no questions, but y'all feel free to throw any questions you have into the Q&A section. And yeah, I think we can continue on with the product. They're taking it easy on you today, Desiree. For
some of us, it's bright and early, so I appreciate it. So the first thing we're going to dive into is our project management dashboard. And before I show that up on the screen, I just want to give a little context of where we started building this. Our very first step for this process, before we started building our tool and our tables, was to go to everyone in our company who might lead a project and ask them to create a list of everything they were working on. We had fields that we would have loved to see, but we also asked people to tell us what they thought was important. Again, I think I said this earlier, trying to meet the team with where they're at with the information that they have, rather than creating a bunch of additional work that they couldn't see value in right away. So we took all of that information that came to me in the form of Google Docs, Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, and I spent a lot of time smushing that into a form that we could use. Obviously, though, that is a terrible strategy long-term. And so we needed to figure out a new way to collect that information and bring that into our platform after this. To do that, we developed these 2 forms. We have our project brief submission. Our project brief is just the clever name we give to all of this information that we collect, but it allows people to submit things that in a PowerPoint or in a Word doc. Again, this is trying to meet people where they're at and how they think best. And so if somebody wants to make a PowerPoint presentation, circulate it with stakeholders, I'm not going to ask them to transpose all that information over here. I am, however, going to ask that they link it to us, provide a link to it, and tell us who's leading the project. And we will go from there and make sure the information's in our dashboard. Some people work really well with answering straightforward questions. And so we also use the form to populate our record this way. And so we ask people to put in their project name, who's leading the project team, description, goal, and I can't see behind my monitor, and some additional information. One of the things that we have done this year is to really differentiate between projects that exist within a single organization and are managed by one executive team member, or projects that cross multiple organizations and therefore need more awareness across the whole organization because of its impact. And so we ask our project teams to provide us this information if it's on a single team. And if it crosses into a second team, we ask for additional information. We use our conditional logic in these forms to help understand what we need from our people and to not overwhelm people with too many questions if it's not going to be important to their work. As an example of what a record would look like, here you have an anonymized record for project 1. You can see who the project lead is, who the project is assigned to. Sometimes in our company, project leads might might be employees who aren't managers, but we ask the managers to manage this tool for us because we believe it provides the appropriate level of detail. Sometimes our younger employees provide a lot of detail, which doesn't help us make those decisions that we need to make as we're moving. Whereas the manager can help build that information at a level that helps our executive team make decisions. So in this case, project lead and the assigned to are the same. That's not always the case. As I mentioned, we get a different information, and we've reflected that here as well with different sections. So if your project crosses 2 or more teams and is longer than a month, we ask for additional information, and we sort it that way so that not every project has all of the information displayed. We also take advantage of the page settings, which is a feature I recently discovered. I was very happy to find because we don't always get things right the first try. And I think as anybody who makes solutions or makes tools for an organization knows, it takes some trial and error to figure out what information works best in what form. And you don't really want to delete information once it's there. Maybe it's from my time as a scientist when we just hoard all of the data, but we don't want to get rid of historical data either. And so I take advantage of hiding these fields to take our obsolete fields and hide them from our team. The team doesn't need to see every historical change we've made to this field or to this solution. They just need to see what's currently active. But as we reflect on improvements and changes we want to make, it's important that we know what we've tried before. We also take advantage, or we also use updates. And so in order to get updates on our projects over time, we ask our project leaders to submit monthly reports, basically, on how things are going. And as an example of this monthly report, you can see we asked 2 questions. Have you hit any milestones, and have you hit any roadblocks? Now, our milestones allow us to really celebrate with our team when things are going well in their projects. And our roadblocks allow our executive leadership team to provide input and feedback if our team's running into any problems. And they can do it by pressing 2 buttons to let us know if they need more help or if they want us to celebrate with them.
And do those submissions come through as a form for the updates and they just choose the project that it's tied to, or what does that usually look like?
Oh, Jeff, what a lovely question.
Wow, look at that.
Thank you for that lead in.
Did not even do that on purpose. That's great. Okay, cool.
So I told you that we do these project updates, and Jeff had the leading question. So nice. So how do we standardize those? Because if anyone's tried to get updates over email, you can get like a sentence, a paragraph, a novel, or someone never responding, right? That's how email feedback works. We use a project update portal, and this portal can be accessed through our dashboard. It's also sent as part of automations, which we'll go through, to people's inbox after day 20 with a link that says, please click this if you would like to submit an update. Again, we're trying to make it as simple as possible to get the information we're looking for from our team. The project lead just selects their project name and they put in a status update. If they need to change the status of the project, it can happen here. If they've hit any milestones, they can tell us about them. If they're hitting any project difficulties, if you hit any project difficulties, they can describe the issue that they're facing. And if they've recently done a presentation to the organization or in a different capacity, we don't ask them to rehash it. We just ask them to link it. And the goal is to not duplicate work where possible. So if they've already got a presentation that they've made for a small group meeting, pop that in here. Let me know if you hit a milestone. Let me know if you're hitting roadblocks, and we'll escalate it as appropriate. All right. And I mentioned those automations. And because I've anonymized our solution, it doesn't transfer the automation. So I pulled those out of our actual solution. And you can see that our team gets emails if someone submits a project brief that needs to be converted into a SmartSuite form. We are exploring closeout forms. So as a project wraps up, we send an email right now to the team saying, tell us about how it went and what we could do better next time. If projects are on hold for extended periods of time, we send an email to ask people if this project status is all right, or if we need to evaluate whether it's resourced appropriately, or if we need to cancel it. We have executive team members who wanted an update every time something changed on a status. And so we helped develop that for him so he could get the kind of information he was looking for. And then Jeff helped us do those automated update requests, where if an update's required, it checks a field. If that field is checked, we send an email. And so we use automation to minimize the amount of time that we have to run around and find people to answer these questions so that we can focus on solving the problems that they bring up.
Desiree, I do have a question for you. Something that comes up often with other folks, and I think you do a really great job of it. When you put forms into dashboards and you clearly title your tables in a way that allows people to know where they need to go to do what they need to do. The question is, does this form populate the table underneath, or is this just a form that, what was the thought process behind that, and why was it successful?
Yeah, we do have a table underneath. I don't think I've anonymized any of this, so I'm not going to click through it. But we do have a form that sits, or we do have a table that sits underneath of this. This table links to our project list. One of the things that we were trying to solve with this in particular is the limitations of the last edited field. The last edited field on our primary record is great because it tells us if we've made any changes to that record ever. One of the ways it's not helpful is to set up time-based check-ins. And one of the things that we were noticing with our team doing is they would go in and they would update information in the primary project log. They might put information in text. If a project took 6 months, it was really hard to follow up that text and see how the project had evolved. It also meant that I couldn't make any changes to the record in the live form or in a test or in like our test record. Like I couldn't make any changes down in this section because it would change everything in those projects if it was a formula and say the last time it was updated was yesterday. And so it would reset all of our update dates. By using linked records, it really allows us to see how a project changes over time. And it allows us to highlight, hey, we hit a milestone 2 months ago and now we're hitting a roadblock. Or, wow, this project was stuck with a roadblock for 2 months, but they overcame that roadblock and actually exceeded expectations. And now they're reporting milestones. Let's celebrate it. The linked record, I think, allows us to really see the granularity from month to month, which is the frequency with which we request updates. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think you just do a great job of guiding. Obviously, it's largely management that you have collaborating in the tool, providing these updates, but just guiding them to the right place. Very cool. We do have a question that came through for you before we continue on. Yeah. Adrian is starting to do more automations. What do you think is the best way to figure out what automations are truly needed for your team? Is there a process for you specifically?
Yes. Some of them I look at and let's see, is there a process? I would say that for both the updates and the closeout that we're rolling out, both of them started with me collecting those updates manually to figure out exactly what questions we needed to ask the team. So I did the initial legwork of chasing everyone down and saying, sit with me and tell me about your project. What changes are you making? How are you struggling? What's going on? And from there, we took those updates and we made a form out of the questions that people were answering. And I did the manually running around for a very long time before I got the updates in a form I wanted. We followed with first we did the completely manual where I typed everything up and we created the form. And I worked with each project lead and each manager across the organization to teach them how I wanted the form filled out. After that, I automated the emails. So I didn't start with automations as the first pass. I started with collecting the data, understanding how I wanted to collect it, moving into the form, and then automating the form. And the project closeout, we actually have done similarly. So in the first couple months of this year for project closeouts, I went and talked to everyone and said, this is what you said your impact was going to be. Tell me how this project has actually impacted this process. Let's talk through it. Let me understand why you made this choice. How do you think it could have gone better? What did you really like about this? And we took those and we made a closeout form. And we'll probably be automating that in the next 2 weeks as we meet with project leaders. So some of the automations are easier. As an example, the executive team member who wanted an update every time, an email every time somebody changed a status, I'm not going to track that. That was a simple one to be like, yes, I can automate that and you can get the email you want. But for things related to the process and the team, I try to be very thoughtful about what I automate so that it doesn't fill their inbox and become noise.
Date-based reminders, I feel like.
Yeah.
Starting with those, like when a record matches conditions, if this date is super important and it's not at a certain status, let me know, let them know. Yeah. Some more straightforward automations, but super powerful, super useful.
Great. Any other
No,
questions so far?
no more questions at this point, if you want to continue on.
Great. So I wanted to highlight what is my first tab on this, but the last tab in the process, and that is our dashboard. So this is our key goal summary dashboard view. It's something that we use to review information with our executive leadership team, to develop our reports for them. This view allows them and you and anyone in our company, really, because this is a public dashboard within Terray, to see what our goals are, how many active projects we have towards each of those goals, and how many projects in total we've put towards those goals this year. And we use different count fields in order to capture this information, but you can see with my generic text that goal 5 had 14 projects so far this year. 4 of them are active, which presumably means of the 10, they are either complete, canceled, or planned. Or I guess in theory, on hold, but we don't have too many of those. We also use this view to pull information from our project updates, and it allows us to share milestones on cross-team projects at a glance. So in this set, you can see that we have 9 where we hit milestones and 34 where we did not. Fortunately, only 2 of our projects had roadblocks. None of them have been completed in this set, and all of them had no status changes. The downside with making a dummy copy for demo is that all of your dates reset to the date you do this work when you have automated record titles like I do, which is the date this record was created and the project name. And so these projects were not all technically updated on May 22nd, but that's when the solution was recreated. So it's a little less informative in this view. But it basically allows our executive leadership team to look at all our projects on a glance and understand projects that were recently updated, recently canceled, or recently completed. And they don't look at every project. They only look at projects that meet certain criteria. And so out of all of the 100+ projects in our dashboard that we collect across the organization, our executive leadership team takes an active interest in only about 17 of them. These are the things that are truly cross-functional, that cross different levels of our organization and different teams. And these are the projects that we feel require the most coordination across our organization. And so this is the end of our project dashboard demo. Before I hop into the next solution, are there any questions about the things that we've built here? Or are we ready to talk about our wonderful change management system?
Based on what I'm seeing in Q&A, I think we're ready to talk about change management.
All right.
But we'll wait for just a moment. Nothing. We're getting thumbs up. I think everybody's excited about change management. Let's do it.
So as Jeff mentioned, one of our key stakeholders asked us to develop a change management system. And one of these stakeholders was someone who was initially quite reluctant to have SmartSuite in the system. One of his concerns was just having, I think, more platforms and more things to check. And he didn't really understand why we had to do this over some of the other things that were already in the company. I'd like to think we won him over, at least in part, since he came to us and asked for this solution to be developed specifically for his team. This is a system that we built for what is called our production group. This is just our group that produces things for internal use. And they're a group that primarily works off of standard operating procedures and documents that tell them exactly what they need to do. And this solution allows them to report any deviations to that process. So anything that happens in their workflow that would prevent them from following that SOP exactly correctly. And it also allows them to write up any change notifications. So changes they are making to SOPs or to the process, to the form, fit, or function of any of their pieces of their work. And it allows this not just to post it to this board, which is helpful so we can track them, but also allows it to communicate to everyone else who is involved in that process up and down our company to know how things are changing and why. Similar to our other solution where we try and meet people with where they're at, these forms are not just embedded into this submission portal on this solution. There are also links in Slack channels for these teams. They are emailed out to them initially, and they are bookmarked on all of the instrument computers for these teams. And so if at any point somebody is operating and running a process that runs into a problem, they get to describe it. They select their name as an author. Because we use these forms, we want to assign it to the right team and right person, but we don't set it up so that they have to be logged into SmartSuite to do it. And then we ask them briefly, what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, and who did you talk to before you moved on? More often than not, this is their manager, but it's an opportunity to follow that up. The change notification system is similar. So the change notification happens later on in the process. A deviation can be submitted live as it's happening. A change notification is something that's probably taken a little bit more effort. We ask if you're changing a process that is either covered by an SOP or requires a new one. Making a change that's going to change our safety system, add new materials, increase space, do you need new facilities? Have you changed out, and are you now submitting a new kind of hazardous waste that I have to deal with? Is there software changes that we have to worry about, our hardware? And how would you expect this to impact our data? All of this information is filled out by the team and is reviewed every 2 weeks by the whole department to make sure that it's on track. And for that review, we also make use of dashboards. In the previous world, if somebody had reported a deviation or a change notification, our managers for the team would fill out a slide at a bi-weekly meeting, use that slide to tell the company what happened and why they're making this change. And the next meeting, that slide would be deleted and they'd put in new information. The downside of that system is it's a little hard for people to remember if this problem had happened before or if it was completely a novel incident. And so in using our dashboard in this way, you can still get the things that are happening new. You can pull this up and you can say, in the last 2 weeks, we saw this kind of deviation. This month, we have 2 more deviations than last month. And then as our managers are responsible for this, they can go into the deviation log in particular, and they can pull up all of the things that have been assigned to them. They can see, look for trends. They can see if there's a part of the process that is particularly prone to breaking, that needs more development. And we've actually been able to initiate projects that help correct some of these issues. So we're able to use some of these change management details, these deviations, to feed into our project dashboard. The projects make changes to our production SOPs, which feed back into the change notification system in the change management log. And so we've actually been able to grow the ecosystem of continuous processes. And we're able to link our deviations to any CAPAs that result and to our change management system when they make a change to our system. And our projects are also linked to change management. So if there is an issue, then we can link it to the project that led to those changes. So you can have continuous data for that whole process.
Wow.
Yeah. Linked records across solutions are the way to go.
I love it. I love it.
All right. Now we're going to talk about our asset management system and service contracts. I mentioned at the onset that this was a little bit more complicated of a system. So rather than poke through everything we've got here, Jeff asked me to show the data schema, which I think really highlights that at the center of this is our equipment, but it links to everything. It links to people which live in different solutions. It links to the maintenance information, any service contracts, service providers, and service tickets. So anything where the solution would be broke, monitor behind a monitor is a little bit rough in the morning. It allows us to see a piece of equipment from when it comes in, changes our facility, and ends up being maintained throughout its life. And as you open up individual pieces of equipment, you can see the last time it was serviced. You can see how many times it's been serviced, if it's under an active service contract. And we're in the process of building out automations that'll allow us to automatically send an email that says, in 2 months, this contract will expire, which is a lot better than someone coming in and saying, hey, can I get service on this thing? And you're like, You could have, but now the service contract needs to be renegotiated. So stand by, let me fix that for you. These are things that existed in our company because of how rapidly we've grown. We had a lot of ad hoc processes. And this is our attempt to re-centralize that information and own it in a way that allows our team to work more in the lab and less in the operations when they're not on the operations side. All right.
If I may, while we're here, for folks that aren't familiar with our data schema widget, and if you're not familiar with dashboards as a whole, Desiree's probably given you the absolute best crash course on what dashboards can be when you really lean into them and understand their value. This is one of our widgets that we have. You're going to find it under the utilities section within a dashboard view. It's called data schema, and it allows you to dial into a specific solutions relationships between the different tables or across the entire workspace. In this case, obviously Desiree's highlighting the Terray capital equipment solution. The lines that you're seeing between these blocks first off represent tables, and the lines represent the linked relationships between those tables. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this, we can get into the weeds and talk about all of the cool things that we're going to build into this solution, but I think it's most valuable just to talk about the flexibility of SmartSuite, right? Before we were talking about projects and change management. This is something completely different, probably inspired us to put together a new template for our template library for capital equipment, but I love the creativity behind this for whatever that's worth to y'all. Desiree, don't let me take away from your flow here. I just wanted to highlight that really quickly.
No, it's perfect. This is just really an example of how I view SmartSuite as a good communication tool. This allows us to have all of our data in one place. It streamlines our ability to tell people what's happening with their equipment and allow them to own it. But it's the same thing that we do in our products and our processes, right? We use SmartSuite to help communicate. These are our projects and how they're going. These are the changes we're making in our system and why. These are things that are not working as we think they should. And this is your equipment and how it can be how it's working and when you have service coming up. I think the underlying way that we end up using SmartSuite at Terray is to communicate up and out across our organization. Our projects, we talk to the executive leadership team, but our managers use it as a tool to organize their thoughts. Our change management system, our RAs use it to report things. The managers use it to understand how their system needs to be improved. Our research and development teams use it as inspiration. And our executive leadership team keeps an eye on it to make sure our processes are moving forward. And we look to do the same thing with our asset management system. Just communicate how things are moving across the company so that no one's surprised anymore. Or that's a really lofty goal. So fewer people are surprised less often is the actual goal. We're never going to be perfect, but we can try. And then the last thing I want to show is something that's a little bit smaller and something we're tinkering with on our own, but I highlighted it to Jeff and he wanted it included. So it may have been because of the wizard hat. I want to assume that.
It is, absolutely is.
So we recently launched a tinkering log. It's still in its infancy. We're still figuring out how to work with it. One of the things that came up with in our project dashboard, though, is our definition of a project is something that takes longer than a month. And because it takes longer than a month, which is a somewhat arbitrary deadline that we set up to make the amount of information we're collecting appropriate for the amount of time it's going to take. And we don't want to have a project put up and closed out before we even get an update on it, because then we're missing information. We decided that a project is a project if it lasts longer than a month at Terray. And so we wanted a way to capture those events that happened less than a month. And so we came up with a tinkering log that quickly turned into an idea log and a tinkering log. And so our idea log is just that. It's a log for ideas, and it allows people who work in any part of the company, they can make suggestions on any part of our workflow and things that they might want to see improved. There's no guarantee it's going to happen. There's no guarantee that it's the next thing we're going to work on or that it's a really high impact idea. But it allows everyone at Terray to have ideas about their workflow and suggest them, even if they're not the right person to take on a project for it. There might be worlds where I have a really interesting idea for automation, but I'm not an automation person, and I would not be the one to go and do that experiment. We should send that over to the automation engineers. The other thing we keep track of is our tinkering log. So as I mentioned, tinkering at Terray is anything that's less than a month. These little side projects that people just think about and work on. You can think about these as a skunkworks project log. They're a little smaller. Maybe they're only 1 or 2 people. They're definitely only a couple of days, maybe a week. But it allows people to put information that otherwise just exists in their heads or in a lab notebook somewhere down and offers some sort of record over how people have thought about these problems over time. And one of the fields that isn't part of this form, which again is available also on Slack, in linked messages and in emails. One of the things that's not here is, what would it take for us to do this idea? And the idea is that we would take that, review that with the management team, the executive leadership team, and say, hey, this has come up, or this is an idea of some data that we have. Do we want to invest the full project into this? What would it take for that to be true? Maybe it's more bandwidth, maybe it's more people, maybe it's a milestone of our data before we can actually ask these questions. But it's just places for people to submit the things that they think are cool to work on.
Was it the biweekly meeting that you brought this one up, as well as just a number of different solutions, and for whatever reason everybody got the most excited about the tinkering log solution? What was the story behind that one?
Yeah, as we were looking at changes we wanted to make this year for project management, I had a slide at the end that was like, also be considering ways to capture the smaller efforts. And I had probably 10 slides about changes I wanted to make to project management. And we spent most of the time talking about how cool it would be to have a tinkering log.
That's awesome.
So that one came up with the executive leadership team, and they were like, yes, absolutely, let's do it. And so we were really excited to roll that out. And it's still in its infancy. We're still collecting data, but
another example of meeting them where they're at. It's awesome. Yeah. That's great. We do have a couple of questions that came through, if you're ready, but don't let me knock you off of your flow if you're still showing things in the tinkering log.
That's the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, before we say goodbye, if anybody has any questions, I see a couple came through from Grant Small. The first of which, do you use SmartSuite for document management? We're going to put you on the spot here, Desiree.
I think I would say no, although I feel like somebody requested that in a feature request. The place, I vaguely remember reading about that one, thought it would be cool. The place where we actually capture documents in it in a really clear way is in the asset management system that we're building. We have all our service records that'll go into it, all linked through the assets. We don't typically use it as a document management system today. More features, maybe.
Someday. TBD. Next question. Are you using the task management functionality in your organization? You mentioned using emails for notifications, but I feel like that's largely based on updates and an update cadence. What does that look like?
Yeah, we don't do task management. One of the things that we built out as part of our SmartSuite launch is that this system exists above task management. So we, similar to meeting our team with where they're at and the tools that they like, we decided not to fight with everyone about the different tools that they prefer. If you decide you want to manage your individual project in a Word doc, in a OneNote, in Asana, in Planner, Teams, sticky notes, that is how you want to manage it. SmartSuite lives above that. So we do not track tasks in SmartSuite. We only do the big ideas. And that is partially due to our team's preconceived ideas about the workflows that work best for them. And again, meeting them where they're at. And so we were very clear with our team. SmartSuite is not for task management, it is for projects and bigger management. Trying to keep the records as clean as possible for their utility, not into everything into the weeds.
That's awesome. Okay. Answered that one live. The follow-up question to that one, thanks. That was great to hear. What is the purpose?
The purpose of our project dashboard is for the inter-organization planning and prioritization of projects. And so it's because it's at that higher level that we don't do the task management in it. When we're looking at projects, we look at dependencies between projects. We look at how they're going to play together as projects go, so that we can prioritize that workflow across our organization to make sure Terray is doing the right work at the right time for us. And it's because of that model that we don't focus on the task side. We let the people who are leading the projects determine the tasks.
91 unique project teams working on 150 different projects, I imagine it's probably most important to just roll up the information into one central place, right? Yeah, at the end of the day,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
we look at centralizing that communication so that we know where it all lives. And that's not perfect. It'll probably change 5 more times this year, and it'll be different. If it doesn't look different at the end of the year than it does today, I'll probably be a little disappointed. This is something that we should be evolving, meeting people where they're at, pushing the system to be better.
That is awesome. I'm gonna throw my email here into the chat. Marla, Kara, for questions geared more towards can SmartSuite do this? Can SmartSuite do that? I'm happy to field those if you want to shoot me an email and reply back. But if anybody has any more questions specifically for Desiree on her SmartSuite strategy, what she's used the tool for, what she's thinking about using the tool for, happy to field any of those live on the call. If not, I think we might be able to give you 6 minutes back on your
Great.
day. Yeah.
Thanks
All
everyone
good.
for coming. I'm excited to have been able to share a little bit about our journey. And I would say one of the things that worked really well for us was starting small and getting to, I'm not sure how many people we have in the solution now, but it is way more than the 6 we started with. 71. So we have 71 people in our solution right now. And it only works that way because people see it working and join in the system. So we just meet them where they're at.
And while we're here, it only works and people only come to it when they have people who lean into our solution the way that Desiree has leaned into it. So Desiree, thank you so much. 1, for using SmartSuite. 2, for doing this presentation for us. And 3, for continuing to be creative in the product and serving as an inspiration for others. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Appreciate everybody who joined us today. If you have any questions, again, feel free to email me, jeff@smartsuite.com. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.